Hello again, it's just me on Wednesday afternoon. I've no idea when this will go up, Friday maybe. We've been out down the high street and had lunch in our favourite Lebanese, Syrian, Middle Eastern restaurant, Sips and Dips, and had shawarma and fresh orange juice with ginger for lunch. Jeremy had something else. He had all hot things. He had hot, sweet, pink chai. Anyway, this is by way of a little book haul. There's Socks. I've just disturbed him from his resting on my chair while I've been out. In the post today, I got things. First of all, I got this, No Strings Attached, a huge, wonderful book about the Jim Henson puppetry workshop. And it's a gift from a viewer of this channel and a distant, or maybe not so distant, cousin, Lee, who comes from the northeast, the same as me. We have grandfathers who were brothers. I think that's right. So that makes us cousins, I guess. Removed once or twice. I'm not sure. Oh, this is the bit about the storyteller. And because he and his wife, I think, have been watching some of these films of mine, and I mentioned the storyteller the other day, this was a book he used at one point in making puppets, I think, or when he was interested in that. Anyway, he said, would I like it? He asked me. And it's a lovely thing to get in the post. So thank you to Lee. Also in the post was issue 1 of this, the Mulgrave journal. It's a crazy kind of fanzine, basically, very lavishly produced fanzine by Bob Fisher and Andrew Orton and Andrew T. Smith, and it's based around their audio company, Mulgrave, who do audio dramas on CD, download and vinyl, but they do various things. They've invented a early 80s fantasy TV show. They've hypostasized it, if that's a word, back projected this fantasy show that we would have all have loved. Bob exists in this world of what's the word? Oh, there's a word for it, isn't there, to do with the invented future that we never had as Generation X, the kind of fantasy of, it's not historiography, it's something else. Oh, it's gone. It's a great word. Anyway, he has that wonderful website, The Haunted Generation. Hauntology, that's the word I'm looking for. The idea that people from about my age are haunted by the hypostasized future that never happened, the future of things like The Tomorrow People, and all those kind of 70s shows that looked forward so excitedly to what the 80s, 90s and 2000s might be like. And very little of it kind of came true. And so he reviews books and TV shows and talks about them. This is a really lovingly made book. It reminds me a bit of Scarfolk, actually, thinking about it. Bob has also been publishing his journal from 1984 when he was 12, I think. I think he's 2 years younger than me. Every day this year he's been posting pages from his diary. His diary being very, very similar to mine at the same time or the same age, which is merely a list of who you played out with, what you're reading, what you watched on TV in great detail, and what you had for tea. He did an event based around both this journal and his diaries in Stockton, I think, in recent weeks, and we couldn't get through to see it. Anyway, it's nice to be seeing what they're up to. I think they seem to be having great fun in paying so much attention to producing these crazy cultural products. Aren't we all? Anyway, that's lovely to get, and I hope it continues. I love the idea of getting fanzines. Somewhere I've got, and I was looking at these the other day, my Doctor Who fanzines of the 1980s. Here they are, on this shelf. Now, I wasn't connected with fandom. The smell of 1982 still. But somehow I saw an advert for Scaro, Simon M. Lydiard's fanzine. And in 83, 84, I sent off my postal orders for these. They were so clever and so erudite and slightly ahead of even the sophistication I thought I had at 13, 14. And I just read these fanzines like mad. They're a particular kind of art form, I think. Everything became much glossier later and not as much fun, but look at the size of that tiny print. These tiny, closely printed reviews, usually quite vexatious reviews, and fiction. I wish they'd all come back, so that's why I'm delighted to be able to get something like the Mulgrave Journal. In fact, last year when we were staying with Neil and Sue Perriman in the summer, not too far from where Bob is actually, I had this whole idea, wouldn't it be great to make a fanzine, a very primitive fanzine with those kind of stippled drawings and typewritten articles, but base it around the Robin's Nest universe. All those sitcoms about Robin Tripp, Man About the House, and Robin's Nest, and the tangential show, George and Mildred, and invent a kind of fandom for those shows. The fandom's there, but they've certainly never had fanzines. I thought that would be great. Fan fiction about George and Mildred. Anyway, I haven't got round to that one yet. Neil thought it was a very stupid idea and told me so. Right, today I've been down the high street and we had lunch and I had to go to the post office to send a parcel to the States. And it was a book that I had to sign for somebody, a short trips collection, and every author had signed the front, and this book's been all over the world. So I was doing my part of that relay race, signing this copy of Short Trips Snapshots with my story Fanboys in, and I'm not sure I've even got a copy of it myself, actually. My own archive of my own books is so haphazard and I keep giving them away, so I'm not sure I've got that one. Anyway, so I had to go to the post office and do that. I went to Bobcat Books, our local independent second-hand and new bookshop, and bought a pile of things that I wasn't really intending to. But when I was there, because they do culty books, they do pop art stuff, they do science fiction and fantasy and kids books, I always find something that I want. And today, I looked straight away at their science fiction masterworks from Gollancz and ended up buying this because they're cheap as well. These are new books, but these are £5 each, which is amazing actually. That's like cheaper than anywhere. This is Jack Finney's The Body Snatchers, the book that all the versions of Invasion of the Body Snatchers is based on. When Becky Driscoll turns up at Dr. Miles Bennell's consulting rooms after hours one August evening and tells him that her cousin Wilma doesn't think that her uncle Ira is really her uncle Ira. This is just the beginning of a nightmare for the sleepy town of Mill Valley. As the number of similar stories multiplies, Miles discovers the horrific truth. Aliens are taking over the bodies and minds of his friends and neighbours. 1955. This is back to the 50s again for science fiction. In this little side odyssey I'm having this summer, realising how wonderful 50s science fiction is and how strange. So that's my next science fiction read, although I do have that pile I got delivered the other day. Star Trek, you know about my not guilty, my unguilty obsession, my guilty pleasures in reading Star Trek novels. This is The Starless World by Gordon Eklund. It's a 70s edition of a book which I read in a Corgi reprint in about 1986, and I don't have it anymore. I'd forgotten about it. It's a shorter one, but listen to this. I had this kind of Proustian rush when I read the back of this. Captain Kirk encounters Klingons and nocturnal creatures known as strangers and the sun god himself in a journey of incredible suspense. Inside the hollow shell of a strange remote planet, Kirk and the Enterprise crew discover a planet within a planet, energized by a white dwarf star, a planet like a lost Eden populated by a race of small, gentle, furred bipeds, a planet falling towards a black hole to spectacular peril and inescapable doom. With a terrific cover, actually. An inside-out world. And suddenly it all came back. The atmosphere of this, and I think I described that atmosphere to other books from that time and went looking for it in books like The Wounded Sky, other Star Trek books of that time. But actually it was this one that I particularly liked and lost. So that's good to find that again. And a collection of Jane Yolen's fairy tales, Tales of Wonder. Now, as you know, I'm on a bit of a fairy tale reading jag this summer, alongside everything else. And Jane Yolen is someone I've admired for a long, long time. She's part of those writers, usually collected up in the, I don't know who published them, but it's the best of fantasy and horror each year, this collection that went from all the way through the 90s. And I've got the first few volumes, and I just love those books. They tended to collect up the people whose books were remaindered in that special Darlington bookshop, full of American books that I always talk about. And Jane Yolen is one of these people. This is an 80s collection, and it's a very generous, big collection of fairy tales. Quite expensive in paperback, but it's something you never see anywhere else. So I was willing to part with a £5 for that. And then a reprint by Thames and Hudson. I hadn't seen this was out. I'm a huge fan of Quentin Blake's drawings, and this is a kid's book he illustrated in 1960 about a boy who's told he's not trying hard enough at school, making wicker baskets. He's not doing a good job, and his teacher tells him you have to try really hard at what you're doing, and he suggests growing antlers, and he does, just to show her. It's the boy who sprouted antlers, and I've read about it in books about him, but I've never actually seen a copy. So to find a nice new hardback like this, beautifully done. Reminds me of Thames and Hudson's reprints of Nicholas and the Gang, which are just beautiful objects. I bought the whole series of those quite expensively. I might have shown you them before, I'm not sure. Anyway. And then the last thing, I went to the only charity shop here in Levenshulme, the Children's Society, and it's irresistible because they're doing DVDs, 5 for £1.99, even the box sets. So I've ended up buying the other day the first 2 seasons of The X-Files for 40p a season, which you can't refuse. And last night we started watching The X-Files from the beginning, a show which I only ever dipped into. So that's interesting. We're really going back to the 1990s. We also watched the first 2 episodes of Twin Peaks. So that was fun. Anyway, so I can't resist. And somebody's horror collection has been decanted into that charity shop. The Children's Society has a whole load of video nasties, which is kind of irresistibly funny. I ended up buying things like The Last House on the Left, which I'd never seen before, which made us hoot with laughter. It's so blackly comic. Unbelievable. That sounds really sick, but there are some funny bits. And so I had to go back there. And amongst the books, they had this Sylvia Wharf's, I think it's Wharf or Wharf. It's not War. It's spelt the same as Evelyn Waugh, but it's not pronounced the same. That's my understanding. Her book, The Menims, from 1993. The family of sentient rag dolls who live in an old-fashioned house in Gateshead, I think. And they hide from the world. A bit like the Borrowers, but more cumbersome. They have to draw the curtains and peep out at the world and go out only after dark. And they look vaguely human, but when you see them up close, you realise that they're made of cloth. They're like the Ugly Wugglies in Edith Nesbit's The Enchanted Castle. As I go on describing books to you, I realise that everything goes back to Edith Nesbit in children's books, probably because everybody in the 20th and 21st century who writes kids' books has had their Edith Nesbit obsession at some point. This is a really special book. There were 4 sequels, following very much the pattern of the Borrowers books by Mary Norton, where they have to leave their house and find new homes to live. As refugees, really, refugees from the human world. It's a very, very touching book. I always remember Subi, who's the son, who's got a blue cloth face, so he's more conspicuous in public. And I always read that as a kind of queer metaphor. And Miss Quigley, who visits, and she's the same as them, and she pretends she lives elsewhere. But when she's finished having tea with them, she sneaks away into the cupboard under the stairs where she really lives. It's very tragic. There's a tragedy underlying all of it. So this is a Methuen edition. I think it's Methuen. Julia McRae was the list. It was 1993. Yep, first edition. So that's quite a find. I mean, it's red and it's slightly. It's not that battered. I don't care about that stuff. I do care about having a lovely copy of this to reread. It's something I've gone back to over the years. At the time, in the mid-90s, I wrote to Sylvia when Marked for Life came out, and she was very friendly. Less friendly when I sent her a copy of Marked for Life, and she was appalled by all the gay sex and the filth. She was appalled. I got the most awful letter about it from her, which I've got somewhere still, that I'd sent something filthy to somebody who was old enough to be my grandmother. How dare I? I felt so ashamed. I just thought it's all art. You know, I don't know, I thought we were living in a different age, really. But anyway, I felt so ashamed and apologised profusely for my filthy novel. And I don't think she intended the kind of queer metaphors that I found in the Menims. But that's the nature of writing fantasy, isn't it? That you leave that world open to the interpretation of your readers, whoever they turn out to be. Anyway, that's my book loot today, which is unlooked for and slightly crazy, but I'm very glad to have. Right, I shall go. The cats ran off. I'm going to spend the rest of the afternoon happily reading, and I hope wherever you are, you're getting some time to spend doing whatever it is you like most to do as well. Okay, goodbye.